This is our monthly conversation around anti-racism hosted by the Artist Impact Coalition. For those who don't know, the Artist Impact Coalition is a wonderful coalition of organizations and independent artists working to serve the needs of North Adams artists. It comprises of Mass Mocha's S's for Artists program, Walkaway House, Common Folk, City of North Adams, Sarah Sutro, Anna Farrington, and other independent artists and folks. Today, our conversation is going to be hosted by Common Folk. For those that don't know, Common Folk is an artist collective based in North Adams, Massachusetts, where we all are, or maybe not all of us are. I see some faces that might not, that are from other places. And we are about 40 or so members, and we are all creators in North Adams, emerging creators in particular. And our collective serves emerging artists in establishing themselves or not creatively in North Adams. We offer a studio space, shared studio space on 12 Holden Street, and also we have a retail space as well. So if you're looking for any goodies from local artists, come stop by when we're open on the weekends. Before we get into our programming for the evening, I did want to take this opportunity, that some of you know me, I'm a city councilor in North Adams, to just quickly share some really amazing updates that are happening in local government. This past Tuesday, I believe, possibly the Tuesday before, the council unanimously voted to adopt a rule. So we have council rules of order that help govern our meetings and ourselves as a body. And we unanimously adopted a rule that every councilor at the beginning of their term will be trained in diversity, equity, and inclusion principles as related to their work in local government. This was a work that was done by a group called which originally was the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion group, now is called the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access Work Group of the city, also unanimously adopted by councilors to form. And this group will be the group that designs this training for councilors. One point in particular that was a part of the conversation in the work group was around accountability and how to hold councilors accountable to this work. There aren't rules that make, we can miss as many meetings as we want as councilors. There are a few things that we can be required to do. And so as part of this rule, in April of that term, all councilors who take the training will be announced at that meeting. So you will have an opportunity to know who has taken that training, who has not. And I hope that if folks don't take the training, that we do the extra work of holding them accountable the next round. So I just wanted to share that because it's a really unique thing that we're doing. Not a lot of city councils have those measures, and I hope that it will become a model for other communities, and most importantly, positively benefit our residents and community members here. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you all. And of course, I think I'm speaking to the choir here, but please go vote. It's very important. We're 2 weeks out. There is a ballot box outside of City Hall that you can securely place your ballot in if you don't want to put it in the mail. And the city clerk's working very hard to count all of those wonderful ballots. So without further ado, I'm going to get us into our programming. Thank you all for listening to me. Welcome to this wonderful conversation. I'm going to pass it over to Common Folks Member Coordinator, Becky Waterhouse.
Thanks, Jess. And thank you all so much for coming. Common Folk is super excited to be facilitating this fourth conversation now through the Artist Impact Coalition. So just to introduce myself, my name's Becky, and I'm as Jess said, the membership coordinator over at Common Folk. And I'm also pretty closely tied with the Artist Impact Coalition as the kind of communications person and the person tasked with handling the logistics of these conversations. So having all those pieces come together for this is very exciting. So thank you all. To give some background on how we came to this topic for this conversation, the leaders of the Artist Collective, who are kind of like this core team of super volunteers, would be staff members in a perfect world, had the chance to take a multicultural bridge training through Multicultural Bridge down in Lee, Massachusetts, with some other area creatives, and just found this particular exercise to be really helpful, particularly in defining these ideas of equality, equity, and liberation, connecting those to real world circumstances, and also to really aid in some self-interrogation. So while Common Folk is a collective made up of 40 people, we're all still individuals that come and bring a lot of our own perspectives and perceptions to the table. So that is very similar to the Artist Impact Coalition's approach to these conversations, is that while we're all here sort of representing maybe our creative practice or an institution or an organization, we are still individuals engaging in this work as individuals. And so we find this particular exercise really helpful in approaching it individually. So with that said, this is going to be a very conversational style event. While I'm sort of going to be facilitating and presenting some images, really the whole point is that we all get to talk with each other about these ideas. So if you are comfortable with either turning your camera on or unmuting yourself in order to engage in that way, we highly encourage you to. But of course, if you would prefer to just be a fly on the wall, that's also all right too. But really the purpose of this event is for us to have a conversation together around these different topics. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I'll be able to still see you all. Okay, let's not look at my email. All right. Hopefully you all can see this presentation. So you are all now in this little sidebar on the side for me. So as I'm asking questions, I'm gonna do my best to sort of scroll through and see who might be like waving or raising their hand, but it might take me a second. So if you're feeling willing, please feel free to just jump right in. We're all very friendly and welcoming in this group. So please feel free to engage. Yeah.
Real quick too, you can drag the sidebar more to be in the like middle part of your screen so you can see more faces if you want.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so you all should be looking at an image that has that are very similar, but on the left side it says equality, on the right side it says equity. I hope everyone's able to see that. Yes. Okay, love it, great. And so I would love to just jump right into this. Who is willing to hop on and just explain to us what the story is here between these two panels?
On the first one on the left, equality, everyone's given the same resources, but not everyone has the same access because of that. And an image on the right, resources are allocated so that everyone has the same access. Is a simplistic way of putting it, I think, but.
Yeah, no, that is perfect. Yeah, I think the main ideas to cover here are that with equality, you're all starting from the same place, regardless of what the needs are. And then on the right side here, for equity, everyone is getting what they need, even though it might not be distributed equally or fairly, but at least the access, everyone's able to have equal access as a result of that. Thank you so much. And I would love to immediately try and have us connect this to some real world circumstances. So what areas of any of our daily practices or our organizations or our businesses do we see these kind of ideas play out, where things are structured perhaps equally, but there's room for improvement in order for them to be more equitable, just so we can put this in some like real world circumstances and not just in a cartoon.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is, the stimulus checks that we all got as part of the CARES Act. So there were there was a cap. If you made more than X amount of money, you didn't qualify. But if you were under that, everyone was getting the same dollar amount, regardless of whether they even needed it, whether they lost a job. So that I see as a good example of equality versus equity.
Totally. Thank you, Molly. Yeah, I think I see Elizabeth's hand up. Go for it.
Thanks, Becky. So I know that at our meetings, not everybody has been given a computer from this, where we work, and Wi-Fi access is really shady. So if somebody's Wi-Fi has gone out, then they just stop participating in the meeting. We don't like stop and say, let's reschedule. It just keeps going.
Thank you, Molly. Or not Molly, sorry, Elizabeth. All right, I'm scrolling through here. Okay, I apologize for the delay. It takes a while to see who might be raising their hand. Wonderful, thank you. And yeah, I don't want to spend too much time on talking about these two ideas, because I have a feeling a lot of us have probably seen this image before. So thank you for engaging for that amount of time. But really the next question and the topic I want to focus the most on here is what is present in both of these images that is causing the problem that the stories are trying to address. Chris, I think I see you. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's a different height, so the short little dude on the right needs more of those crates to get up above the fence. The guy on the left doesn't need one at all. So I guess those are some differences: is the different height in each person and what they need to be able to see over that obstacle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Naomi? Oh, Naomi, you're muted.
There.
There you go.
I was going to say the obstacle as well, the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Yes. So, Chris, you're totally right. Like, what is sort of a challenge for both of these is that everyone is coming from different foundations, but the biggest challenge here is that there's a wall that's preventing them from accessing this baseball game. So once you remove the wall, this whole conversation totally changes. So in a way, the wall is sort of this underlying assumption that we've all accepted as just a challenge that needs to be overcome. And therefore, we're talking about boxes and distribution of resources and different ways to overcome this other problem. When really, without the wall, we don't even really need to be talking about boxes anymore. All of a sudden, there's an entirely new set of opportunities and realities to be faced, and a lot more things to explore. So this brings me to my next question that I'd love to spend a lot of time on as we're thinking about action, particularly in North Berkshire, but also in talking about wherever we're all coming from, because I realize we're all coming from different places. But what fences exist in North Berkshire, whether in the creative community or in our businesses or our creative practice? And I know that that can be sort of a weird thing to visualize, what these major obstacles are, because they can be really huge. So an example that I just want to share to get our brains thinking about these ideas is just an example with Mass Mocha, because it's a relatable and close to home example. So as someone who worked in the box office, this was just an experience of mine that was very normal to me. So obviously Mass Mocha relies on ticket sales in order to operate, and that's just the reality of the situation. And another reality of the situation is that North Adams residents, not all can afford the ticket sales in order to enter the museum. So this doesn't mean either is wrong, it's just the scenario of our economic situation. And so the boxes that are placed to overcome that fence are really wonderful programs, like the library passes. They have like free on the 3s, free on the 4s, or even last year they got a grant in order to offer free admission to Berkshire residents for 3 months. And so these are all boxes that can help get over this hurdle. Really, what would happen if this fence, this need for money in order to operate, the reality of just capitalism in the US, if that fence didn't exist anymore, then we wouldn't need library passes, we wouldn't need free on the 3s, anybody could go into Mass Mocha at any time. So all of a sudden that whole group is liberated and Mass Mocha is liberated, and everybody can achieve and pursue whatever they wish to pursue. And so this is just one example to sort of get us thinking of these future realities. And so with that, I realize I'm talking a lot, but really the point is for you all to talk. What fences can we start to identify that exist, that we've been trying to place our resources to overcome, particularly in North Berkshire, but we can, of course, talk about our own experiences and our own practices or institutions. Michaela.
Just a small one I was thinking about, and I don't know if this is relatable to everyone, but like there's a lot of affordable housing in North Adams, but it's not exactly the best quality of housing, and maybe creatives don't have the space for a studio or even the funds to rent a studio, or they came here to be an artist, but they don't have the means to sort of access that space to pursue their passions. So now they're just here to live and work and be in like a not so great living environment, and then there's that barrier of like never getting to a studio because they're just kind of working to live.
Totally. And so in that case, the fence that they're trying to overcome is affordable living and working space.
Chris, did you have your hand raised before?
Yeah.
I did. I was just thinking about like better government funding, like, so in order to, provide the community, the public, community here in North Adams with more free access to the museum. If there was better government funding of these institutions, which the nonprofit sector is, doesn't always fall into those sort of programs. But if there was better government funding of institutions like Mass MoCA, then there might be more free days and more free access to the museum that is not present right now.
Yeah, definitely. That would definitely be an option for starting to dismantle that barrier that exists. Alex, go ahead.
So inspired by what I'm looking at in these pictures, I think in some ways we might be missing that middle person that we hear about, the cliff effect, right? Of if you're getting support at a certain level and then you don't need as much support, but then all of the support goes away. And so maybe I know that a lot of our museums have EBT card pass program, so you can get in for that, but then we might be missing that person in the middle.
Right, so making sure we're looking at the whole range of folks who might be in need of resources or are trying to get over that barrier. But what are some other fences that we can start to come up with that exist that we're maybe not fully recognizing are there, but have just accepted are there?
I think a fence can be, how are these folks being asked to take part in the leadership of the decision making about the fence? And did they participate in taking down the fence? Was the fence taken down for them? It's mostly questions more than ideas, but I think there is a deep lack of leadership that represents the community holistically, and I would say that across most institutions and organizations. I think leadership has become a very specific skill-based space, and access to that leadership seems to have its own fence around it. And I think that's something worth trying to break down in many different sectors in the community. It's something that I think Common Folk really tries to do, and it has a lot of challenges, but allowing people to be leaders, whether they have the qualifications to be a leader or not, and to trust that they have the knowledge about their own experience, the experience of their peers to bring to the table to grow and develop the whole picture. And I would say especially young people face that challenge in seeing over that fence. You have to be 18 to be on a board. Why is that? Why do you have to be 18 to be on a board? I don't know. And even then, how many 18 to 25-year-olds do we have on boards locally who are making decisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that points to a really good question of how the fence even got there in the first place. I think it's important to consider, we're looking at this in order of like 1, 2, 3, equality, equity to liberation, but part of me wonders, shouldn't that third photo be the first photo where there isn't a fence? Who put up the fence? And was it the folks standing behind it? Probably not, but it could have been. So when we're talking about liberation, is it liberation from something that was put up, or liberation towards more their own leadership to be able to decide whether or not a fence is there in the first place? So thank you for bringing up that leadership aspect. Molly, go ahead.
I'm happy to. I also saw that Allison had their hand up.
Oh,
If
yeah.
someone wants to go before me, and then I can go after.
Oh, thanks, you're sweet. I don't mean to be depressing, but I think the pandemic is the fence that we all have around us at a certain level, you know, and the inequality of, you know, I mean, the ones that are really suffering in the pandemic, you know, and the great unknown, in a sense.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
So I was thinking about what Sweens was telling us about in terms of this awesome offering for city council members now, and the DEI training that city council members are, you know, going to be, you know, asked to go through, whether or not they do. And it has me also kind of thinking about like a training like that being the boxes that people are standing on, and, you know, the fence being, you know, all types of both systemic racism, but also like the wall of us unable to see the racism, us being identifying myself as a white person, but you know, thinking more broadly and imagining like a situation where, you know, boxes are required, and so the blue shirted person says like, this box is such a waste of money, why are we doing this? The red shirted person like actually gets to see and gets to understand something that that they weren't able to see before, but then there's still folks who like still can't see what we're talking about, even with that amount of kind of training. So kind of what I'm thinking about is the ways in which our own prejudice and blindness is a fence towards seeing, you know, all the other fences in the world, and the ways in which the like equality in that kind of help and mandatory training equals equality, whereas equity might be more of what's needed. But then also we could be in a situation where someone thinks that we're at the liberation panel, and so doesn't even think that they're staring at a fence, right? And so what does that mean?
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And that starts to bring it into, you know, a different topic to explore, which is the box might not necessarily be providing resources to folks who need it just to exist, but it's also providing new perspective and necessary knowledge in order to be good leaders for other people. That's really interesting.
I just want to talk a little bit about, or just maybe ask some questions about, you know, I think we, obviously being in the arts, we spend a lot of time looking at visual representations. And I think many of us who work in museums or galleries, we focus on what's on the canvas. But I think we're at a place where we need to start looking at what's not there, because I think that tells us as much as what is there. So I wonder if we were to look past the fact that there was a fence, that we needed these boxes, and just look at that third square, and what do we find beyond that? So if there was not a fence, is there still something that we see that creates some sort of inequity? I mean, I think there are a lot of things that, a lot of good points that people have brought out, but I wonder, you know, when we talk about inequity, a lot of these things are things that are predetermined before someone's even born, things that can't be changed. And so that creates that inequity. So I wonder what we even see when we look into the stands, or why are these people on the outside and not sitting in the bleachers? Just things that we can start to question about what we're not seeing versus what we are seeing. And then the idea of really, when it all comes together, you know, we talk about access, and I think that this is a really good representation of access, because, you know, these ideas of inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, they're all intertwined, but all of these are different stages of what we've gone through. So just being in the room was not enough, because that would have been equality. But if we can't play in the sandbox, and we're not really, then there really isn't any equity. And I just feel like there are a lot of things that we can start to question about what we have identified, but to really start to look closer at what we haven't identified. And I just wonder what people think might be missing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, I guess I was just kind of going to say what Erica Wall already said, like this group of young, presumably young brown people here in the backfield of the baseball field should be in the crowd, in the bleachers with everyone else, I guess is what I got from this image. Is why are they, you know, so far away from everyone else? Why aren't they included in the bleachers full of people that we're seeing? So I guess kind of redundant to what Erica said, but also like that was just my first thought. You know, that's something I noticed of how that image could change to be, you know, more inclusive.
I think it's also really important to think in terms of justice and affirmation, that we're having a conversation about instead of with as we talk about these images. And so there's yet to be really too much conversation about how would those who have been barred from the experience like to be represented. So instead, it's a conversation in which there is not actual work with community. It seems as if it's work for community without knowing what the community would like. And in that space, there is no way to push forward in any way that breaks down a barrier, because you haven't actually done the work to ask the question.
Totally. Thank you for that. That kind of reminds me of what Jess had mentioned of who are the leaders, who are the people kind of in charge of this story and telling this story. Because right, we are here talking about them and not with them. I think that's a really, really important point in terms of community work.
Maybe this is another side of the same coin, but similar to what you were all just saying, when I first started thinking about what I was looking at, I thought, oh, what would these three people be doing on the other side of the fence? That would be cooler and more interesting to me than baseball. And then, like, how do we make that the important thing and not the baseball the important thing?
Oh, so you're sort of suggesting, why is baseball the thing that is more interesting rather than whatever they have going on among themselves? Interesting. Allison, did you say something? Or, oh, sorry.
No, just you saying that was like, then are the people on the other side left out too? Or how do we the liberation is on both sides, I guess, too, in that way.
Right.
But aren't the people on the three people we're sitting on the other side of the fence, aren't they trying to engage in the baseball game? Like,
yes, I mean, I've totally taken this metaphor somewhere else. I admit.
Right, but it is interesting to think about, once the fence is gone, it does benefit those that have been on the other side of the fence, because now crossing can happen on either side. Allison, yeah, go ahead. You'll just have to unmute yourself.
Is it like a man's world? It seems like there are men there, right? I kind of presume that I don't see any women, but not that, I don't know. Is it a man's world? And then the idea of baseball, is that sex or no? But what's baseball? Well, I don't know, going off too far there.
Right, no, they are important to question sort of the artistic choices here of using male presenting figures and baseball as the activity. Yeah, yeah, definitely worth still recognizing. Oh, Erica, do you have your hand up? Erica Barreto? Or maybe not. Oh, okay, sorry.
I was gonna throw in there too, kind of building on that idea of, you know, whatever the representation is, someone had to come up with that. And what were the choices for this particular, you know, to have a baseball game and to have the people look the way that they do. And I think that that's also a question going back to what Sweens was talking about when we talk about authority and decision-making power. What we see visually is what we are going to subscribe to most. What we see most of is what we're going to think we're supposed to see. And I think that there's a lot, again, kind of looking at it in terms of layers of what we see, whether it be in an image like this, or what we see on a movie screen or on a commercial, or what we see going on around us. There's always so many layers, I think, you know, to those stories. And then but I think what we're trying to figure out is, how do we as individuals reconcile that and then call ourselves to action, you know? But I think a lot of it is just, I only say that because I've seen a couple of things in chat saying that, you know, if we had more representation by artists of color, or if we had more artists or more people of color who are in leadership positions. But the question is, what is it that deters that or prevents that from happening? Is it that fence? Is it what we're doing? Is it what we're seeing? Is it that people see a certain space and think that you're not welcome there, although that may not be the case? But if you don't see anyone that looks like you, then it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy. We're never going to actually build that kind of diversity that we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And that's a really good segue into sort of the next section of this conversation today, which we will do in our breakout groups. But really, the next section here is this fourth panel. What does the fourth panel look like now that we've talked a lot about liberation and the fence and the location of the folks in this image and where they are, what the fence represents, what the things that we can't see represents. I want to task everyone to continue the story here and try and come up with what happens once liberation has been achieved. So what would you do in this story if the obstacles were totally removed and every person was liberated to pursue their dreams? And I do want to get kind of, you know, get really, really brainstormy about it, because there are no right or wrong answers of what you would like to put in that fourth panel. So if everyone would be able to just take a few moments to either draw it out or just like think about it in their head of what this fourth panel might look like, and also to assign sort of one word that might best describe what that fourth panel looks like. And then when we do our breakout groups, we'll spend about 15 minutes, because I know a lot of folks have to leave at 6, but those first 15 minutes talking about what you came up with and just what your ideas were and brainstorming together what you think that fourth panel could look like. And then the next 15 minutes listing some tangible action steps of how anything like that could be achieved. And so the goal really is when we're thinking about action steps and what needs to be done, it's very important to envision what the end goal looks like. What is it that we're all actually trying to achieve? And that's why I find this particular activity so helpful for that, because we can all really dream up of what a liberated reality can look like for all of us, and then we can create a roadmap from there of how we might be able to get there. Awesome. So I hope you all were able to have some good conversations in your breakout groups. We're just gonna report back on what everyone talked about, whether it was, specific ideas of what that fourth panel might look like, and what kind of action steps were bubbling. And if nothing, concretely came out, just some kind of overview of what was talked about. So whether that be the facilitators or someone from the group who would like to go. I guess we can start with my group, Molly, if you want to just talk about what we chatted about.
Sure. So in our vision of this fourth panel, we both acknowledged many of us in the group have been aware of this model or this graphic for a while and have been trying to envision that and struggling to. And so kind of an acknowledgement of that, of just the blankness of that fourth panel space. But some of the things that kind of came out was thinking about kind of collective ownership of an institution, of a place, of a community. And so we spent a lot of time thinking and talking about collective ownership and ways to just have dialogue and to bring people together that are from different sectors of a community or different backgrounds. There's some really wonderful things that MCLA is doing that that Erica Barreto talked about in terms of the Institute of Arts and Humanities and kind of the conversations that are happening in bringing arts and kind of non-art spaces and using it to talk about non-art space. Oh, go ahead, Erica.
No, I just wanted to also name BCRC.
And BCRC, the other Erica. And another important action step that was acknowledged was taking care of ourselves during these processes too, so that we don't burn out, and taking that step back. And another piece is thinking about money and how we often think that money can solve a problem, and the ways in which it can and can't, and to be very conscious of, if we're just throwing money at something, are we throwing at it in a way that actually helps dismantle what we're trying to dismantle, or are we just buying boxes? Anything else, group? Yes, that's it for us.
Thanks, Molly. Who would like to go next?
I don't mind going next. My computer might die, so I want to jump in there before it does. So our group went back and forth into really focusing on the doing for and doing with aspect of the fourth panel, and talked a lot about whether the next step is a community conversation, but then there was some really valuable pushback of but is there even trust for that? Is the foundation too cracked to get to that point yet? And so then that's when we started talking about listening and how to rebuild that trust. And I think many of us were not totally sure it looks different for every institution, every person, and every individual. But I think maybe something that we pull out of that is just an analyzing the trust that you yourself have or the institution has with the community and the representation of the community. And then we also talked a lot about leadership and how to open the doors of access to leadership, and what that looks like, and talked a lot about the sort of elitism of board structures and how there are often requirements to have to donate a specific amount of money to make those kinds of decisions about an institution, and how, you know, there has to be buy-in from that level of an institution or an organization in order to shift that. And so what that looks like, we had a lot of discussion about. I don't know if anyone else wants to share other pieces of the conversation. I know we talked about a lot of things.
Well, I think, and that part of the conversation you were just mentioning sort of resonated with what Molly was saying about sort of collective ownership models, or ways that sort of you distribute leadership and power a bit more than tends to be the case in a lot of our cultural organization structures.
Awesome, thank you. And I recognize we have about 7 minutes left. Are there 2 more groups that have to go? Okay, awesome. So which of those 2 wants to go next?
I'll go for our group. So yeah, we had a really great conversation. So in terms of like what the 4th panel was looking like, we talked a lot about the idea of having a choice. So, you know, a few people brought up like, oh, the 4th panel, you know, maybe they're playing the game, right? And then other folks brought up the really great point of like, well, what if they don't want to play the game? It's so it's the freedom of being able to have the choice to participate and play the game. You know, and providing the access for people so they are able to make that choice. And you know, I think that work can start on an individual basis, thinking of the things that we do and don't do, kind of, you know, self-interrogation, and how that can contribute to the greater kind of community goal of being able to give people that choice. You know, it's kind of like pointillism, right? So the work that you do within yourself, it starts with you, and then to zoom out and get kind of the bigger picture is kind of what brings it all together. And just going back to the idea of choice in terms of institutions and leadership, and kind of what Sweens was touching on earlier, it's rather than assuming what the community needs, and making a decision based on that, it's kind of asking what the community needs. So you are truly serving everyone. So everyone does have the ability to make that choice for themselves. Did I get everything? Does anyone else want to add anything from the group? Did I repeat it verbatim perfectly?
Thank you, Sarah. Who would like to talk with the last group?
I can share. So we talked a lot about what Sierra sort of said for their group. Definitely surrounded around the idea of choice, and talked about the what ifs of the 3 people in the images, and, you know, where is this stadium located in the community? Maybe it's not in a very wealthy community, and like, do they have more accessible days or resources for the folks in that community? We definitely talked a lot about Mass MoCA and kind of the metaphor of of accessibility from them in our immediate community. And some other things relating to choice that we discussed was what if the kids were, or what if those people in the images were on that side of the fence because they wanted to catch the home run balls and not the foul balls by sitting in the stands? What if, what if they wanted to be in the stands, or what if they didn't want to be in the stands and that's just where they wanted to be? And maybe what if the stadium or the institution doesn't want to be inclusive, and maybe they need to suck it up and sort of just say that they don't want to be inclusive, or maybe they don't say it, and what's that language look like? So there was a lot of like what ifs and similarities, obviously, that we discussed like the other groups did. If anyone else wants to add, I said so much, so I'm sorry.
Awesome. Thank you, Michaela. And thank you all for sharing what great conversations you had in the breakout groups. It's great hearing what everyone talked about and how it can be so different, but with the same prompt. So moving forward, we are going to attempt to collect all of these sort of action ideas, even if some are maybe a little abstract, and just share them all with you down the line. Something that the Artist Impact Coalition recognizes that we want to do more of is more of a follow-up process after these conversations. So we love being able to facilitate these with all of you and have these conversations together, but recognize that it is a long process, and most of the work is done when we aren't able to sit here and chat about it. So be on the lookout for that follow-up email. And then for the next session, I believe Mass Mocha Kids Space will be the host. So we don't have exact details totally solidified yet. I don't know, Amanda, if you want to plug it any more than just that general announcement, but we are very excited to do that next month.
Yeah, I can just share. It's Thursday, November, what is that, the 19th, 5 p.m., same time. And we'll be focusing on the work of Wendy Red Star, who's a member of the Apsalaga or Crow Nation, and talking a lot about her heritage and representation in museum spaces. And so we're going to dive into one of the works in depth, the way Erica Wall has done, but using a bit of a different technique. And just starting with the art to get some of the conversations going. So we look forward to seeing you all then, and spread the word. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. And thank you all for joining. That concludes our program. I really, really appreciate all of your participation and engagement tonight. So thanks for joining.
Thank you, Becky.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, thanks, Common Folk.
Thanks all.
Good job, you guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
See y'all.